People say every marriage has its hidden cracks, but no one expects them to shatter at the worst possible moment. Sienna Whitmore had spent years believing she was living a dream. Wrapped in wealth, surrounded by elegance, and adored by her husband, Nathaniel. From the outside, their life looked perfect. A breathtaking estate, an endless stream of luxuries, and a love story that others envied. But in just one night, everything crumbled. A single, cruel discovery unraveled the truth, leaving her feeling deceived, exposed, and heartbreakingly alone. She refused to stay trapped in a life built on lies. Without hesitation, Sienna made a decision that no one saw coming. She left. No dramatic confrontation, no last words. Just a letter with carefully chosen words and a silence that would haunt Nathaniel for the rest of his life. To the world, Sienna and Nathaniel were the definition of power and prestige. She was the poised heiress of a renowned publishing empire, and he was a billionaire investor whose name alone could make stock markets tremble. Their wedding, held on the sun-drenched cliffs of the Amalfi Coast, had been a spectacle, an event the tabloids dubbed the wedding of the century. But behind the glamour, Sienna had learned an unspoken rule among the ultra-wealthy. Appearances were everything. For years, their mansion in Belgrave, Massachusetts, had been the heart of high society. A grand estate worth nearly $70 million. Its ivory facade gleamed under the sun, hiding the emptiness within. The marble foyer, adorned with an enormous chandelier from a Venetian auction, sparkled like a jewel. Endless hallways, lined with priceless art, whispered of a life so carefully constructed that it felt more like a stage set than a home. Despite it all, Sienna had convinced herself that love existed between them. They shared quiet, intimate moments, late-night meals prepared by world-class chefs, secret escapes to a small pizza shop in Boston, away from the weight of their extravagant world. Nathaniel was far from perfect, but she had made peace with his flaws. She had been raised to understand men like him. Coming from an elite family herself, she knew what it meant to be married to power. The endless board meetings, the never-ending business trips, the constant pursuit of more. As a child, she had watched her own parents live in a cold but functional marriage, built on status rather than affection. She had always wanted something different. She longed for nights filled with laughter instead of silence. For love that wasn't dictated by duty, for a life that felt real. And when she discovered she was pregnant, hope bloomed inside her. Maybe this child would be the missing piece. The bridge between them. The reason their love could finally become something genuine. But hope can be fragile, and illusions don't last forever. Sienna had convinced herself that whatever distance had formed between them would disappear the moment Nathaniel learned he was going to be a father. She believed that once their baby became real to him, the unspoken tensions would dissolve. Love, after all, had the power to heal, didn't it? But the illusion of security unraveled faster than she ever could have imagined. Sometimes a single moment is all it takes to destroy everything you thought was true. At 5 months pregnant, Sienna was often exhausted, her days punctuated by waves of nausea and fatigue. Yet, despite it all, she remained hopeful. She pictured Nathaniel as a devoted father, gently holding their child, reading bedtime stories, building the kind of family she had always longed for but never truly had. It was a crisp November morning, the wind rattling the windows of their estate in Belgrave. Wrapped in a soft knit sweater, Sienna sat in her study, flipping through nursery furniture catalogs. Should she go with soft pastels or elegant neutrals? She imagined the quiet coos of her baby filling the beautifully designed room, a future that felt warm and full of promise. A gentle knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Her assistant, Emma Carlyle, stepped in, holding a stack of mail and a few packages. Sienna barely glanced at them until her eyes caught a particular envelope. It wasn't addressed to her, but to Nathaniel. The sender? A hospital in Boston. A strange feeling crawled up her spine. Nathaniel's medical providers were in New York. Always had been. So why was a hospital in Boston sending him official correspondence? Her first instinct was to dismiss it. A charity request, perhaps? A business partnership? Some event Nathaniel had agreed to fund? But the unease settled deep in her chest, refusing to be ignored. Her fingers trembled as she carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, bearing the letterhead of a prestigious private clinic. It was a bill, for prenatal checkups and lab tests. Sienna's breath caught. Her name wasn't on the document. The patient was someone else. Ariana Donovan. Sienna's vision blurred as she read the due date. The pregnancy was nearly identical to her own. And then the final blow. Father's name, Nathaniel Whitmore. The world tilted. The air in the room felt suddenly thin, suffocating. Her eyes darted back to the page, desperate for an explanation, an error, anything that could make this not real. But the address listed was one she knew all too well. Nathaniel's Boston apartment, the one he used on supposed business trips. And there, in perfect clarity, was his full name. This wasn't a mistake. A cold wave of betrayal crashed over her, making her body feel unsteady. She gripped the armrest of her chair, willing herself to breathe, to think. Sarah's voice cut through the fog. "Miss Whitmore, are you all right?" Sienna forced a tight smile, blinking away the tears stinging her eyes. "It's just a billing mix-up," she said, her voice eerily calm. "I'll take care of it." But Sarah hesitated, noticing the way Sienna's fingers trembled slightly as she tucked the letter away. "Are you sure?" "Perfectly fine," Sienna replied quickly, standing and gathering the envelope, stuffing it out of sight. "I just need a moment alone." Once Sarah left, Sienna gripped her phone, pacing the study. Her free hand rested protectively over her belly, as if shielding her unborn child from the truth that had just shattered her world. She thought about the nights Nathaniel came home late, blaming work. The weekends he claimed to be away for emergency meetings. She had trusted him, believed him, because that was what a good wife did. Now, with every passing second, the weight of betrayal pressed heavier on her chest. Her thumb hovered over Nathaniel's number, her heart pounding with every ring. And then, he answered. Nathaniel answered on the third ring. The distant hum of traffic and the rush of wind in the background told Sienna he was outside. His voice, warm and familiar, nearly broke her. "Hey, sweetheart," he greeted her. She swallowed the lump in her throat, gripping the phone tighter. "I need you to come home, now." Her voice trembled despite her best efforts to sound composed. Nathaniel hesitated. "Sienna, I'm in the middle of a meeting in Manhattan. Can it wait?" "No," she said, steel creeping into her tone. "It's urgent." Even through the miles between them, he could sense something was wrong. His voice softened. "All right, I'll be there as soon as I can." By the time he arrived, Sienna had read and reread the letter so many times that the words were burned into her mind. She sat in their bedroom, the fire casting flickering shadows along the walls, yet she felt nothing but cold. Nathaniel burst through the door, his expression tight with concern. "What's wrong? Are you okay? Is it the baby?" She didn't answer. Instead, she simply handed him the envelope. The color drained from his face the moment he saw his name. His lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, she saw him truly caught off guard, like a child caught in a terrible lie. "Sienna," he started, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what you think." A bitter laugh bubbled in her throat. "You don't even know what I think." Her voice shook with restrained fury. "So why don't you enlighten me? Who is Ariana Donovan, and why is she having a baby with your name on it?" His gaze flickered, to the fireplace, the door, anywhere but her. His grip on the letter tightened. "It was a mistake," he murmured, his voice hollow. "I swear it ended. I never thought she would get pregnant. I didn't know how to tell you." Sienna's body trembled, rage and heartbreak colliding inside her. "You have another baby on the way, when I'm 5 months pregnant with yours?" The betrayal cut so deep it left her breathless. She refused to let her tears fall. She had to hold on to something, if only for the sake of the child growing inside her. Nathaniel took a hesitant step toward her, reaching out as if to comfort her. "Sienna, I am so sorry," he whispered. "I was an idiot. It meant nothing. She meant nothing. I was just lonely." She shoved his hands away, her fury spilling over. "Lonely?" The word burned as it left her lips. "You had me. Your wife, your pregnant wife. And instead of talking to me, you went behind my back and destroyed everything." In that moment, everything. The wealth, the pristine marble floors, the glittering chandeliers, the extravagant life they had built, felt utterly meaningless. That night, Sienna locked herself in the guest bedroom, though ironically, she now felt like a guest in her own life. She refused to share a bed with him. Nathaniel lingered outside the door, knocking, pleading, his voice cracking with apologies. She ignored him, turning up the volume on a classical playlist, hoping the soft melodies would drown out the storm in her mind. Sleep never came. At some point in the night, she pulled out a leather-bound journal, the one she had bought on their honeymoon in Santorini, intending to fill with happy memories. Instead, it became the keeper of her pain. She scribbled down the questions clawing at her mind. Why did he betray me? Was it my fault? What about our baby? Can I ever trust him again? Each question cut deeper, like shards of glass pressing into her heart. By dawn, she found herself wandering the house, a ghost moving through its corridors. And then, through the haze of grief, an idea took shape. She couldn't raise her child in a house built on lies. She needed to leave. Where could she go? Sienna's mind raced with possibilities. Should she retreat to her family's estate in Vermont, where childhood memories still lingered? Or disappear somewhere completely new, Europe, maybe Asia, somewhere the name Whitmore wasn't woven into every conversation, every whispered remark at society galas? By the time the first light of dawn stretched across the sky, she still had no final decision. But one thing was certain, she couldn't stay. Even if only for a short while, she needed space, distance, air to breathe freely for the first time since discovering Nathaniel's betrayal. Outside her door, Nathaniel was relentless. His voice, raw with desperation, echoed through the halls as he pleaded with her to talk to him. Text after text appeared on her phone, each more frantic than the last. She ignored them all. Later that morning, when Nathaniel left for an important board meeting, one he couldn't cancel without causing suspicion, Sienna knew this was her chance. She sat at her vanity, hands trembling as she put pen to paper. Every word she wrote felt like carving into stone, permanent, irreversible. You have inflicted a wound so deep that even breathing feels like pain. Perhaps I was naive to trust you so completely. I loved you. I believed in you. I thought our life was built on something real. But now I see that our so-called fairy tale was nothing more than a cruel illusion. You have broken us in ways that apologies or wealth can never mend. I am leaving. I don't know when or if I will return. Our child, my child, does not deserve to grow up in a home built on lies. Maybe one day I will learn to forgive you. But right now, I can't even bear to look at you. Don't search for me. You won't find me. Sienna. Her hand shook slightly as she folded the letter, but she refused to let tears stain the page. She slipped it into a plain envelope and left it on his nightstand, the last piece of herself she would leave behind. Then she made the call. A private car service. One Nathaniel had no ties to, no control over. She packed light, only the essentials. Her passport, a small stack of cash, a few changes of clothes, and her prenatal vitamins. With quiet, measured steps, she walked out of the estate that had once been her world, but now felt like a gilded prison. The staff watched, some casting worried glances, but none dared to stop her. They knew. As the black SUV pulled away, Sienna turned for one last look. The house stood as grand as ever, its towering columns and manicured gardens unchanged. But to her, it was nothing more than a mirage, an illusion shattered beyond repair. 2 days passed before Nathaniel found her letter. After his board meeting, he had checked into a luxury hotel in Manhattan, hoping time and distance would help calm the storm. He convinced himself that Sienna just needed space, that she would cool down, and they would talk when he returned. But when he stepped into their eerily silent home, unease settled in his chest. Elena left in a car, the staff murmured hesitantly, their voices careful, fearful of saying too much. His heart pounded. She left. At first, he assumed she had gone to her parents' estate in Vermont. But when he called her mother, Margaret Ellsworth, the conversation did not go as he expected. Elena isn't here. Margaret's voice was cold, sharp as glass. And if you're looking for sympathy, you won't find it. You did this. Now live with it. The call disconnected before he could respond. Panic set in. Nathaniel tore through the house, searching for any sign of where she might have gone. And then, in their bedroom, he found the envelope. Her words cut deeper than any business loss, deeper than any financial ruin he could have imagined. Don't look for me. You won't find me. He sank onto the bed, the letter clutched in his hands, his world tilting beneath him. Nathaniel Whitmore was a man used to control, a man who could manipulate stock markets, dictate the futures of entire corporations. Yet in this moment, he had lost the one thing that mattered most, his wife, his unborn child. and for the first time in his life, he had no way of fixing what he had broken. The promise of a fresh start felt empty, almost mocking. In the days that followed Sienna's disappearance, Nathaniel exhausted every resource at his disposal to track her down. He hired private investigators, leveraged his security contacts, and even discreetly offered money to staff who might have insight into where she had gone. Nothing. He scoured bank transactions, airline bookings, and credit card records, but Sienna had been more resourceful than he'd anticipated. Perhaps with the help of her closest friend, Charlotte Hayes, she had orchestrated her escape with precision, covering her tracks so well that every lead turned into a dead end. With each failure, desperation clawed deeper into him. Sleep became a cruel torment. He would bolt upright in bed, drenched in sweat, haunted by dreams of Sienna's tear-streaked face. He saw her everywhere, in reflections, in the corners of empty rooms, in the silence that now filled their once vibrant home. For the first time in his life, Nathaniel did something he never thought he would. He prayed. He prayed for Sienna's safety, that she wouldn't do anything reckless, that, somehow, she would find it in her heart to forgive him. But there was no answer, no calls, no letters, no sign she was even alive. While Nathaniel's world unraveled, Sienna was quietly rebuilding her own. She had traveled across the country, finding refuge in a small coastal town outside of Seattle, Greystone Bay. A sleepy community known for its lighthouse and misty harbor, it was the farthest she could go from New York, while still remaining within the country. More importantly, it was a place where neither her family nor Nathaniel had any connections. The town's constant drizzle and overcast skies matched the storm in her heart, and the anonymity soothed her like a balm on raw wounds. She rented a modest cottage from an elderly widow, Margaret Yates, who had been advertising it for seasonal travelers. Though Margaret was curious about her new tenant, she didn't pry when Sienna vaguely mentioned needing solitude to focus on her writing. In that little house by the sea, Sienna began the painful process of rebuilding herself. Each morning she woke early, made herself tea, and placed a hand over the gentle kicks of her unborn baby, a reminder of the life she was determined to protect. She filled pages of her journal with tangled emotions, trying to write her way through the heartbreak. By the time she reached 6 months of pregnancy, her body demanded more care. She found a local OB/GYN, Dr. Harold Lindstrom, a kind-hearted man with graying hair and a reassuring smile. He never pushed for details about her past, though he sensed the weight she carried. One day, he gently suggested she see a specialist for prenatal depression. Her first session was with Dr. Carmen Delgado, a cruel twist of fate, given that she shared a name with Ariana's doctor in Boston. But this woman was entirely different. The session began with a question Sienna had been dreading. "Tell me about the baby's father." Sienna's breath hitched. For so long, she had tried to pretend he didn't exist, to imagine her child as wholly hers, untouched by his betrayal. "He's someone I once trusted," she whispered, her voice breaking. Some days, she missed the ease of her old life, the convenience of drivers, housekeepers, and world-class medical care. But she cherished the small freedoms she had now. The ability to walk along the shore unnoticed, to sit on a weathered bench by the docks and watch the ferries disappear into the mist. Sometimes, as she stared at the endless expanse of the ocean, the wind carried away her tears before they had a chance to fall. Back in Nathaniel's world, events were unfolding in ways he had never anticipated. With Sienna gone, Ariana Donovan saw an opening, an opportunity she had been waiting for. Unlike Sienna, Ariana wasn't the kind of woman to fade into the background. She was ambitious, calculating, and fully aware of the power her situation gave her. Nathaniel had intended to keep her hidden, a secret never meant to surface. But now, with Sienna's absence, Ariana no longer felt the need to stay in the shadows. She was ready to step into the light. Ariana Donovan was done waiting in the shadows. She wanted more than just financial support. She wanted recognition. She wanted the world to know that her child would carry the name of a billionaire. She craved the security, the luxury, the status that came with being tied to Nathaniel Whitmore. At first, she played the role of the discreet mistress, but as weeks passed, her patience wore thin. She started calling him incessantly, showing up unannounced at the towering Manhattan headquarters of Whitmore Capital, ignoring the whispers of the staff. For Nathaniel, her presence was unbearable, a constant reminder of the wreckage he had created. He tried to keep her satisfied with money, hoping it would be enough. He bought her a sleek penthouse in Boston, set up a trust fund for the child, and covered every expense, from prenatal appointments to luxury baby items. But Ariana wasn't interested in being a well-kept secret. She wanted him. She wanted him to hold her hand at doctor's visits, to rub her feet when exhaustion hit, to promise her that she was more than a mistake. But Nathaniel couldn't bring himself to give her that. Every time he looked at her, all he saw was the agony he had inflicted on Sienna. The weight of his choices pressed on him like iron shackles. His life had become a fractured mess. On one side, the desperate search for Sienna. On the other, the suffocating obligations to a woman he never truly loved. Some nights, he didn't go home at all. He slept in his office or checked into a hotel just to avoid Ariana's relentless demands. And every night he called private investigators, hoping for a lead. For weeks, there was nothing. Then at last, a break, a withdrawal, $50,000 in cash from Sienna's personal trust made at a bank in Seattle. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Within hours, Nathaniel was on his private jet, flying across the country, chasing a ghost. Seattle was gray and damp when Nathaniel arrived, the rain mirroring his sinking mood. His first stop was the bank, but he was met with walls of legal red tape. Privacy regulations prevented employees from revealing any details. Attempts to bribe his way through only made things worse. One teller, however, let something slip. A subtle mention of a woman who matched Sienna's description staying at a local motel. Hope surged in him. But when he got there, she was already gone. Nathaniel drove aimlessly through the rain-soaked streets, knowing she could be anywhere. For the first time in his life, he faced a reality he couldn't control. If Sienna truly didn't want to be found, no amount of power or influence would bring her back. Regret settled in his chest like a stone. For years, he had prided himself on being a man who could fix anything. But now, he had lost the one person he couldn't afford to lose. A month passed. Sienna was now 7 months pregnant, and the weight of carrying a child alone was taking its toll. Simple tasks left her exhausted, but she refused to rely on anyone. She borrowed books from the local library on childbirth and parenting, reading each page with nervous determination. To avoid leaving a financial trail, she bought baby clothes from thrift shops, paying in cash. She had abandoned her old life so thoroughly that even something as simple as swiping a credit card felt dangerous. But loneliness crept in, relentless and uninvited. Some nights she longed to call her mother, to hear a familiar voice, to know if she was worried. She thought of her father, gone for years now, and wondered what he would say if he saw her like this, isolated, struggling, lost. And then, there was Nathaniel. Despite everything, despite the rage and betrayal, there were fleeting moments when she missed the warmth of his arms around her. But each time she felt herself wavering, she forced herself to remember. The lies, the humiliation, the undeniable truth that the man she loved had built a life behind her back. She could never go back. One late afternoon, as she returned from a routine prenatal checkup, a wave of dizziness hit her. The world spun, her legs buckled. She barely made it to the steps of her cottage before everything went black. By the time she opened her eyes, she was in a hospital bed, the sterile white walls pressing in around her. A nurse stood by her side, adjusting an IV drip. "You're dehydrated," the doctor informed her gently, "and your blood pressure is dangerously high." Sienna swallowed hard. She had been so consumed by her pain, by her need to escape, that she had ignored the most important thing, her baby's health. This was her wake-up call. She wasn't just running anymore. She was fighting for something far more precious. Gripped by fear, Sienna realized a painful truth. She couldn't do this alone. Her body was demanding rest, her mind was exhausted, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to lean on someone else. Margaret Yates, her landlady, noticed the change in her almost immediately. The older woman didn't pry, didn't demand answers. She simply stepped in, bringing warm soups, adjusting pillows, ensuring Sienna had everything she needed as she recovered. During quiet evenings, Margaret shared pieces of her own past, stories of love, loss, and regrets that had shaped her. Through these small, unspoken acts of kindness, Sienna found something she had nearly forgotten: hope. Not everyone in the world was out to betray her. Some were simply there to help. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, Ariana's pregnancy advanced. Nathaniel did what he could, attended a few doctor's visits, bought nursery furniture, but every action felt forced, mechanical. Ariana knew it. She pushed him to move in with her, to be seen with her at social events. But Nathaniel always found an excuse, distancing himself as much as possible. Then the rumors started. Whispers of Alina Whitmore's mysterious disappearance spread through high society. Some said she had left after a marital dispute. Others claimed something more sinister. Ariana seized the moment. Leaking carefully crafted stories to gossip magazines, she painted herself as the devoted mother-to-be, abandoned by a heartless man. She conveniently omitted any mention of Sienna's pregnancy, ensuring the world saw her child as Nathaniel's only heir. Nathaniel was livid. "You're making me look like a monster," he snapped during a heated argument in her penthouse. Ariana merely shrugged, arms crossed. "Maybe if you treated me better, I wouldn't have to go to the press." That night, after storming out of her apartment, Nathaniel sat in his car for an hour, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Rage, regret, grief. How had everything gone so wrong? He closed his eyes and let himself imagine a different reality, one where he still had Sienna, where he hadn't shattered their life with one selfish mistake. But that time was gone. Now all he had was a scheming mistress, a missing wife, and an unborn child slipping further from his grasp with each passing day. Desperate, Nathaniel turned to George Farnsworth, a former law enforcement officer turned private investigator. George had a reputation for finding the unfindable. At first, he was hesitant to work for a billionaire known for controversy. But when Nathaniel made it clear that this wasn't about control, it was about closure, George agreed. For weeks, he combed through records, flight logs, car rentals, temporary lodging. He even reached out to Sienna's closest friends. Charlotte Hayes, ever loyal, refused to give much away. "Elena is safe," she said firmly. "That's all you need to know." But George was persistent. Digging through financial traces, he found it. A one-way trip from Connecticut to Seattle. A flicker of hope. Sifting through hotel surveillance footage, he spotted brief glimpses, a woman with Sienna's profile. The images were grainy, inconclusive. But then, a breakthrough. At a ferry terminal near Greystone Bay, a security camera captured a single, fleeting moment. A pregnant woman, wrapped in a loose coat, boarding a ferry. Her face was partially obscured, but it was her. It had to be her. George moved quickly, traveling to Greystone Bay under the radar. He checked local inns, rental properties, searching for any sign of a pregnant newcomer. For days, nothing. Then, a stroke of luck. An older neighbor mentioned a young woman, sweet, quiet, pregnant, renting a small cottage. With subtle inquiries, George confirmed what he suspected. Her name was Sienna. And then, fate intervened. One afternoon, standing outside a grocery store, George saw her. She stepped out into the cold, a bag in one hand, her other instinctively resting on her stomach. Her face was thinner than before. Her eyes, once full of life, now carried a shadow of heartbreak. But it was her, Nathaniel's wife, the woman who didn't want to be found. George Farnsworth remained at a distance, making no move to approach her. He simply observed. Sienna stepped out of the grocery store, pulling her coat tighter against the cool breeze as she made her way down the quiet street. George watched as she walked toward a familiar direction, confirming what he already suspected, her home. Now, he faced a dilemma. Should he inform Nathaniel immediately? Or should he speak to Sienna first? In the end, his own principles guided him. That evening, as dusk settled over Greystone Bay, George knocked on the door of the small cottage. It took a moment, but then it opened. Sienna stood there, her expression instantly guarded, fear flickering in her eyes. "Yes?" George removed his hat, his voice steady but gentle. "Miss Whitmore, my name is George Farnsworth. I'm a private investigator. Your husband hired me to find you." Her grip tightened on the door. She moved to shut it, but George placed a careful hand against the frame, not forceful, just firm enough to stop her. "He doesn't know I'm here yet," he assured her softly. "He's desperate to find you, but I wanted to come to you first. I want to respect your wishes. May I come in? Just to talk?" Sienna hesitated. Something in his tone, in the kindness of his eyes, made her pause. Against her better judgment, she stepped aside. The living room was small but warm, lined with half-packed boxes and baby items, a quiet testament to a woman preparing for a new life. George took a seat at her gesture, though he could see the unease in her posture, the way her arms folded protectively over her belly. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice edged with wariness. "I need to know if you're safe," George said simply. "Your husband is worried sick. He fears for your health. He doesn't even know if you're still pregnant." A flicker of anger crossed her face, quickly followed by something more painful. "Yes, I'm still pregnant," she said, her voice sharp. "No thanks to him." George nodded solemnly. "Look, I'm not here to defend him. From what I understand, he made some terrible mistakes. But he's still concerned about you. If you want to remain hidden, I'll respect that. I just need to confirm that you're okay. Then I can tell him to leave you alone, if that's what you want." Tears welled in Sienna's eyes. She had fought so hard to cut ties, to disappear. But something about this moment, being asked what she wanted, not just being treated as someone to be found, unraveled her. With shaky words, she told George everything. The betrayal, Ariana, the letter she had written through tears, her desperate need to shield her child from a life built on deception. George listened, never interrupting, offering nothing but quiet understanding. When she finally fell silent, exhausted from reliving the pain, he met her gaze and spoke with quiet conviction. "I won't reveal your location if you don't want me to," he promised. "I'll tell him you're alive, that you're safe. But he might still come looking. He's determined." Sienna dropped her gaze to the floor, voice breaking. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive him," she admitted almost to herself. "But I don't want to see him." George gave a slow nod. "Then that's what I'll tell him." Back in New York, Nathaniel sat rigid as George delivered the news. "I found her," the investigator said. "She's safe. She's still carrying your child, and she appears to be in good health." Relief crashed into Nathaniel so hard it nearly winded him. "Where is she?" he asked, voice raw. "Tell me, George, please." George shook his head. "She doesn't want to be found. She specifically told me she doesn't want to see you. She wants peace, to focus on her pregnancy." A storm brewed in Nathaniel's chest. Part of him wanted to demand answers, to refuse to accept this fate. He could have every resource at his disposal searching for her. But George's steady gaze halted him. Nathaniel had done enough damage. He swallowed the lump in his throat and asked just one final question. "Is she happy?" George hesitated. "She's coping, healing maybe, but this has been extremely hard on her." Nathaniel's jaw clenched as emotion threatened to overtake him. He gave a single nod, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." In the weeks that followed, Nathaniel truly tried, to prove he wasn't the same reckless man. He put an end to Ariana's public manipulations, issuing legal warnings against her attempts to drag his name through the tabloids. Ariana was furious. "You're just going to discard me?" she spat, pacing her penthouse. "After everything?" Nathaniel's voice was ice. "I will support the child, financially, but I won't be forced into something more," she seethed. But Nathaniel didn't waver, and as scandal threatened to unravel Whitmore Capital, he realized something else. No business crisis, no public fallout, nothing would ever compare to the loss of the woman he had driven away. And now, all he could do was wait. The empire Nathaniel Whitmore had built with relentless ambition was beginning to crumble. Investors whispered behind closed doors, board members exchanged uneasy glances, stock prices wavered as uncertainty loomed over Whitmore Capital. The cause of their concern? Their once unshakable leader was unraveling. Rumors of Sienna's disappearance had fueled media speculation, and now questions about Nathaniel's stability threatened his position as CEO. Some shareholders even hinted at his removal. Then, in a shocking move, Nathaniel made an announcement at a press conference. He would be stepping back. For the first time in his career, the man who had once prioritized power over everything else was walking away, choosing to focus on his personal life instead. It was unprecedented. And yet, to those who had seen the weariness in his eyes, the decision was inevitable. Nathaniel sought therapy, attempting, perhaps too late, to atone for the destruction he had caused. Would it make a difference? Only time would tell. At 8 months pregnant, Sienna awoke to a sharp, unbearable pain. A violent storm raged outside, wind and rain lashing against the cottage windows. Lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the sheer panic in her eyes as another contraction tore through her body. Something was wrong. She barely made it to the living room before collapsing onto the floor, clutching her stomach. Margaret Yates found her moments later, doubled over, breath ragged. "Sienna, sweetheart, stay with me," Margaret pleaded, reaching for the phone with shaking hands. She dialed 911. Minutes later, the wail of sirens cut through the howling wind, flashing red and blue lights reflecting against the rain-slicked streets. Paramedics rushed Sienna onto a stretcher, their voices urgent. Her blood pressure was dangerously high. The diagnosis was swift and terrifying: preeclampsia, a life-threatening condition for both mother and child. Sienna was rushed into an emergency C-section, her vision blurring, the hospital's fluorescent lights stabbing into her consciousness. She had never felt so vulnerable. The steady beeping of monitors filled the operating room. She could hear the hurried shuffle of feet, the tension in the air. Between waves of pain, a name slipped from her lips. Nathaniel. Not out of love, not out of forgiveness, but from a primal, desperate need for comfort. Then, everything faded. Somewhere in the sterile brightness of the operating room, a cry pierced through the tension. Thin, insistent, fragile. A baby boy had entered the world. The doctor lifted him gently, his tiny body wrapped in soft blankets, his lungs announcing his arrival with determined wails. Sienna drifted in and out of consciousness, whispers of reassurance washing over her. "The baby is breathing. He's small, but stable." She fought to stay awake, to see the child she had carried for months. And when she finally caught a glimpse of him, so small, so perfect, tears spilled down her cheeks. Relief. But her body had other plans. The preeclampsia triggered severe complications. Her blood pressure remained unstable, and then bleeding. Too much bleeding. The monitors screamed warnings. Nurses shouted for more supplies. The room blurred into chaos. For hours, the doctors battled to save her life. And far away, the one man she had run from was about to learn how close he was to losing everything. George Farnsworth had remained in Greystone Bay, silently watching over Sienna from the shadows. Something had told him she might need help sooner rather than later, and now his instincts proved right. At midnight, George made the call he had promised never to make. Nathaniel answered on the first ring. "George?" His voice was groggy, edged with irritation. George didn't waste time. "Sienna's in trouble." The word sent a chill down Nathaniel's spine. She had an emergency C-section. There were complications. She might not make it. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. "Where?" Nathaniel's voice was raw. "Tell me where she is." Mukilteo General Hospital. Nathaniel was already moving before the call ended. Within an hour, his private jet was in the air, hurtling towards Seattle. Had he come too late? By the time Nathaniel arrived at the hospital, he was barely holding himself together. His suit was wrinkled, his usually pristine hair disheveled. He looked nothing like the composed billionaire the world knew. A nurse at the front desk blinked in shock at the sight of Nathaniel Whitmore in their small-town facility. George was in the waiting room, pacing. Nathaniel rushed to him. "Where is she?" George met his frantic gaze. "She's still in surgery." "And the baby?" "In the NICU. He's premature but stable." A son, his son. For the first time, the weight of fatherhood crashed down on Nathaniel. He pressed his palms to his face, a choked sound escaping his throat. He had lost control of everything, but this was unbearable. Hours passed in agonizing stillness. Then at last, the doors to the operating room swung open. A weary doctor approached. "Mr. Whitmore?" Nathaniel stood, his heart in his throat. "Is she?" The doctor's voice was firm, yet gentle. "Your wife is in recovery. We managed to stop the bleeding and stabilize her blood pressure. She's not out of the woods yet, but she's stable." Relief surged through Nathaniel so forcefully his knees nearly buckled, but guilt still coiled in his chest like a serpent. Would she ever let him back in? And more importantly, did he even deserve it? "She might be unconscious for a while," the doctor said gently, "but if you'd like, you can see your son." Nathaniel barely registered his own movements as he followed the doctor down the long, sterile hallway. His heart pounded in his chest, his hands trembled at his sides. Through the glass walls of the NICU, he saw him. A tiny incubator, a fragile body connected to wires and tubes battling for every breath. A nurse guided him through the sanitization process, washing his hands, donning a gown, before leading him carefully to the side of the incubator. Nathaniel stepped forward, breath catching in his throat. The world outside this moment, his empire, the scandals, the mistakes, ceased to exist. All that remained was this delicate life before him. A swirl of dark hair, tiny curled fists, fluttering eyelids. Nathaniel placed a cautious hand against the incubator, tears dripping onto the sterile floor. His voice came out in a broken whisper. "You're so beautiful." A sob nearly escaped him. He didn't even know his son's name. Sienna had never told him. He closed his eyes, sending a silent prayer, not for himself, but for the chance to hold his child, to hear his name from Sienna's lips, to fix even a fraction of what he had broken. After a few minutes, the nurse gently suggested he let the baby rest. Nathaniel nodded, heart aching, and turned toward his next destination. The hallway to the recovery ward was dimly lit, the steady hum of fluorescent lights the only sound breaking the silence. A nurse, her eyes soft with sympathy, pointed him toward Sienna's room. Nathaniel hesitated at the door. Then he stepped inside and froze. Sienna lay pale and unmoving, her body fragile against the stark white sheets. Tubes ran from her arms, an oxygen mask covered her mouth, the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor the only reassurance that she was still alive. A wave of regret crashed into him so fiercely it nearly took him to his knees. The woman who had once danced with him under city lights, who had laughed with him over stolen slices of pizza, who had loved him without question. She was barely holding on. Slowly, he approached, lowered himself beside her bed, took her delicate hand in his. A lump formed in his throat, thick with unshed tears. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Please come back to me. Please. If not for me, then for our son." He didn't know how long he sat there, speaking softly to her, apologizing between choked breaths. Nurses came and went, checking her vitals, offering him polite smiles, perhaps aware of the heartbreak that filled the room like an unshakable weight. Still, he stayed, waiting, praying. 2 days later, Sienna's eyelids fluttered open. A soft, sterile light greeted her vision. Her body felt weak, heavy, drugged, disoriented. She blinked against the blur, trying to make sense of where she was. Then a face came into focus. Nathaniel. His expression was raw, his eyes bloodshot and exhausted. A swirl of emotions surged through her. Relief, because she wasn't alone. But then, anger, betrayal, the sharp, cutting memories of everything he had done. She tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. Only a raspy whisper escaped. A nurse hurried over, adjusting her pillows and offering her a sip of water. Nathaniel leaned forward, voice trembling. "Your baby's fine," he said, barely able to contain his emotion. "He's in the NICU, but the doctors say he's doing well." A rush of love for her child broke through Sienna's haze. She struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain in her abdomen. "Where is he?" she managed. Nathaniel hesitated. "I'll take you to see him once you're stable." He reached for her hand. She pulled away. Her breath was unsteady, her voice laced with exhaustion and fury. "What are you doing here?" Nathaniel lowered his head, shame weighing on his shoulders. "I had to come," he admitted. "I couldn't let anything happen to you, or to our son. I know you told me not to look for you, but when I heard..." He exhaled, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry, Sienna. I'm so sorry." Her body trembled, partly from the anesthesia, partly from the flood of emotions she wasn't ready to face. "You have no right to be here," she whispered, tears burning at the edges of her eyes. "I told you to leave me alone." Nathaniel swallowed hard. "I know, and I will, if that's what you want." His voice softened, breaking under the weight of his regret. "But please, let me help you through this. Let me be there for our son." She turned her face away, conflicted. She despised him, but she was terrified of facing this alone. And yet, how could she let him back in after everything he had done? They spoke little after that. The doctors focused on Sienna's recovery, stabilizing her blood pressure, easing her pain. Nathaniel never left the hospital. Though she barely acknowledged him, he stayed, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair outside her room, refusing to leave, refusing to walk away from the woman he had already lost once. And as the days passed, the question remained. Would she ever let him back in? Did she even want to? And if she didn't, was he truly prepared to let her go? Sienna had regained enough strength to be wheeled into the NICU for the first time. The moment she saw her son, so impossibly small, nestled in the incubator with tiny tubes helping him breathe, Tears streamed silently down her face. With a trembling hand, she reached inside, her fingers brushing against his delicate skin. His hand, no larger than her fingertip, curled instinctively around hers. A quiet sob escaped her lips, overwhelmed by the depth of maternal love coursing through her. Nathaniel stood beside her, silent, reverent. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was no past, no betrayal, no heartbreak. Just this. Just the miracle of the child they had created. For a fleeting moment, she wished they could share this joy without the weight of everything that had come before. But the shadow of the past was never far behind. As the days passed, both Sienna and Nathaniel attended neonatal classes together. Under the watchful eyes of the NICU nurses, they learned to change tiny diapers, to cradle their son against their skin for warmth, to administer infant CPR in case of emergencies. In those moments, their animosity faded, replaced by a shared devotion to their child. Sienna found herself watching Nathaniel more than she wanted to. The way his hands, once accustomed to signing billion-dollar deals, now trembled as he gently stroked his son's back. The way he whispered lullabies, his voice barely above a breath. The way his eyes, usually so guarded, softened every time their baby curled into him. For the first time since everything fell apart, she saw a glimpse of the man she had once loved. But reality had a way of creeping back in. One afternoon, as their son lay sleeping in the incubator, Sienna finally voiced the question that had been gnawing at her. "What about her?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "What about Ariana's baby?" Nathaniel exhaled sharply. He had known this moment would come. "I'm supporting her financially," he said, his voice low. "But I'm not with her. I don't want a relationship with her. I never did." "She's 7 months pregnant," Sienna murmured, closing her eyes for a moment. "This is so complicated." "I know," he admitted, shame creeping into his expression. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I want to be here. For you. For him. If you'll let me." She didn't respond. She didn't know how. A day later, their son reached another milestone. The doctors deemed him stable enough to move to a lower-risk section of the NICU. Every small victory felt monumental. Despite the emotional distance between them, Sienna found herself relying on Nathaniel more than she expected. She was still weak from the complications of her delivery, and navigating this new reality alone seemed impossible. The tension between them remained, a raw, unhealed wound, but necessity forced them into an uneasy truce. 2 weeks after giving birth, Sienna was discharged. Her son, however, had to remain in the hospital a little longer. As she thought about returning to the small cottage in Greystone Bay, dread settled in her chest. The steep steps, the isolation, the exhaustion creeping into her bones. Nathaniel must have sensed her hesitation. "I booked a suite at a nearby hotel," he told her. "It has medical staff on call. It's safer for both of you." Accepting his offer meant acknowledging him as part of her support system. But what other choice did she have? Reluctantly, she agreed, and so began their tentative coexistence. They spent hours in the NICU, absorbing every lesson, preparing for the day their son would finally come home. Sienna was physically and emotionally drained. Some days, her composure cracked. In those moments, Nathaniel didn't push. He simply handed her a tissue or placed a steadying hand on her back, a silent reassurance. Nights, however, were different. She insisted on a separate bedroom. He respected her boundaries, staying in an adjoining suite. They were partners in parenthood, nothing more. And yet, unspoken emotions simmered beneath the surface. One night, Sienna jolted awake, her heart hammering against her ribs. The nightmare had been so vivid, the sterile brightness of the operating room, the suffocating panic of her emergency C-section, the beeping monitors screaming around her. She couldn't breathe. Her hands trembled as she stumbled out of bed, her pulse roaring in her ears. Blindly, she wandered into the common area of the suite, desperate for air. There, hunched over a laptop, was Nathaniel. He looked up the moment he saw her. Without a word, he rose to his feet, his expression shifting from exhaustion to concern. Sienna's breathing was shallow, her body shaking from the weight of memories she couldn't shake. Nathaniel crossed the room, guiding her to the couch. He handed her a glass of water, his touch steady as he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. And this time, she didn't pull away. She clung to him. For just a moment. Just long enough to remember what it felt like to be held. just long enough to forget everything that had broken them. Sienna clung to Nathaniel, her body trembling from the weight of everything she had endured. The fear of nearly dying, the pain of betrayal, the overwhelming responsibility of motherhood, it all crashed over her at once. Her sobs came in waves, raw and unrestrained. Nathaniel held her, his hands stroking her hair, his whispers of "I'm sorry" spilling over and over into the quiet of the night. By the time her tears subsided, exhaustion tugged at her, pulling her under. Their eyes met, just for a moment, and for the first time in months, a flicker of something familiar passed between them. Not forgiveness, not love, but something unspoken, fragile, real. Yet, when morning arrived, reality settled back in. Sienna reminded herself, healing was not the same as forgetting. Meanwhile, across the country, Ariana Donovan was furious. She had heard whispers of Nathaniel's presence in Seattle, of how he had abandoned her in the final stages of her pregnancy. Voicemail after voicemail landed in his inbox, laced with rage and threats. "You're supposed to be here, Nathaniel, supporting me, supporting your child. Instead, you're off playing devoted husband to a woman who doesn't even want you." Nathaniel, already drowning in guilt, returned her calls only to set the record straight. "My wife nearly died giving birth to my son," he said bluntly. "I'm fulfilling my duties as a father." Ariana scoffed. "And what about our child? When are you going to be there for us?" Guilt twisted inside him. Two innocent children, his children, were now entangled in the wreckage of his choices. "I will support my child," he said, his voice strained. "But I can't be in two places at once." As Ariana's due date approached, her anger turned into legal threats. If Nathaniel didn't publicly acknowledge paternity, she would leak every detail, their messages, their affair, to the press. For the first time in his life, Nathaniel didn't care about public perception. All that mattered was Sienna and their son. Still, for the sake of the unborn child, he tried to keep the peace. His legal team negotiated a discreet settlement. Ariana would receive a generous monthly stipend and a trust fund for the baby, contingent on her signing a strict non-disclosure agreement. She begrudgingly agreed, though resentment simmered beneath the surface. At 6 weeks old, their son was finally discharged from the hospital. Holding him in her arms, Sienna felt something shift inside her. A love so fierce, so consuming, that it eclipsed even the lingering pain. They named him Nicholas, tiny but strong. His eyes were bright, endlessly curious, as if already searching for his place in the world. Returning to the cottage was no longer an option. It was too remote, too isolated. Yet, she wasn't ready to return to Connecticut, to the life she had left behind. With no clear path forward, she reluctantly leaned on Nathaniel's resources. For now, they rented a modest townhouse near the hospital so Nicholas could remain close to his pediatric specialists. It was supposed to be temporary, but necessity forced them into a rhythm. Late-night feedings, diaper changes, soft lullabies in the quiet hours before dawn. Through every shared moment, tension lingered. Yet beneath it, something else wove its way between them. Tenderness. As weeks turned into months, Sienna noticed something different about Nathaniel. He was quieter, more present. The man who once dictated billion-dollar deals with ruthless efficiency now spent his days learning how to swaddle a newborn. There were no urgent business calls every half hour, no impromptu flights to international meetings. Instead, he focused on Nicholas's health, on Sienna's recovery, on something he had never prioritized before, fixing himself. He had started therapy with a local counselor, one who specialized in marital conflict. At first, Sienna kept her distance, but eventually she found herself sitting across from him in a dimly lit office, a therapist watching as she unraveled years of suppressed pain. With trembling words, she spoke about the betrayal, about the devastation of realizing that the man she had loved had built a life behind her back. Tears spilled onto her lap as she voiced the questions that had haunted her for so long. Was I not enough? Did you ever love me? How could you do this to us? For once, Nathaniel didn't try to defend himself. He listened, and when he finally spoke, his voice was raw, stripped of all pretense. I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid I wasn't enough, that I would fail you, that I would fail as a father. He swallowed hard. I sought validation in the worst possible way. I convinced myself that what I did wouldn't matter, that it wouldn't touch you, that you would never know. His voice broke. But you did, and I destroyed everything. It wasn't an excuse. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness. It was just honesty. For the first time, Sienna saw the flawed, broken man beneath the betrayal. And for the first time, she wondered, was healing even possible? She wasn't sure, and she wasn't sure she would ever trust him again. But for now, that answer would have to be enough. "I don't trust you," Sienna admitted, her voice quiet but firm. "At least, not the way I used to." Nathaniel swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling deep in his chest. "I accept that," he said. "I know I have to earn any measure of trust back. If it takes a lifetime, so be it." For months, they had lived in an unspoken truce, coexisting, co-parenting, but never fully addressing the scars between them. Then, an unexpected phone call shattered their fragile balance. Ariana had given birth prematurely, a daughter, Cassandra. Like Nicholas, she had arrived too soon, facing complications that required specialized care. Despite the fractures in their relationship, Ariana reached out, desperate. Her baby needed a higher level of medical attention than her local hospital could provide. Sienna felt an ugly surge of jealousy at the mention of Ariana's name. But when she looked at Nathaniel, saw the anguish in his eyes, she knew that if he ignored this, it would haunt him forever. Ultimately, she did something that surprised even herself. "Go," she told him softly. "Make sure she's okay." Nathaniel hesitated. Leaving meant stepping away from their delicate progress, from the trust he was trying to rebuild. But he also knew that if he turned his back on his own child, he would never forgive himself. And neither would Sienna. In Boston, Nathaniel moved quickly. He arranged for Cassandra's medical transport, ensuring she received the best possible care. He stayed just long enough to confirm that she was stable under the care of pediatric specialists. Then, determined to prove his sincerity, he returned to Seattle within a week. He expected tension, he expected coldness. What he hadn't expected was how much Sienna had missed him. She wouldn't say it, but in the quiet moments, when she held Nicholas and remembered the nights Nathaniel had stood behind her, guiding her hands, she felt the absence of him in ways she hadn't before. She realized that even if their marriage never fully healed, she had come to cherish something else, having a partner, someone to share the burden of parenting. When Nathaniel returned, exhausted but relieved, they finally talked. "Cassandra's stable," he told her. "I'll be traveling to Boston periodically to see her. I owe her that much." Sienna nodded, glancing down at their sleeping son. "I can't begrudge you that," she admitted softly. There was no more jealousy, only acceptance. They had built something new, imperfect, complicated, but real. The final turning point came on a warm summer afternoon, 6 months after Nicholas's birth. Sienna, now stronger and more confident in her role as a mother, decided it was time. She needed to see her family, to mend the broken bridges. And for the first time, she extended an invitation to Nathaniel. She wasn't sure if it was the right choice, but it was the one she made. When they arrived at her mother's estate in Massachusetts, tension hung thick in the air. Elizabeth Ellsworth, her mother, stood with arms crossed, her face unreadable. Then she saw Nicholas. And everything changed. Her expression softened, her lips trembling, as she took her grandson into her arms. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at Sienna, then at Nathaniel, who stood awkwardly beside her, uncertain of his place. Later, in a private moment, Elizabeth confronted him. "I trusted you with my daughter's happiness," she said, her voice sharp, "and you failed her terribly." Nathaniel didn't flinch. "I know," he said, head bowed, "and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." Elizabeth studied him for a long moment. Finally, she exhaled. "If Sienna can find it in her heart to forgive you, then I will too. But if you betray her again, there won't be a third chance." Nathaniel nodded, emotion thick in his throat. "I won't," he promised. That night, in the quiet of the guest bedroom, Sienna finally voiced the question that had been lingering in her heart. "Do you still love me?" Nathaniel's breath caught. His eyes shone with raw vulnerability as he whispered, "With everything I have left." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry it took losing you to realize how much you meant to me." Sienna sighed, cradling Nicholas against her chest. "I'm not sure if our marriage can be saved," she admitted. "But for his sake, I'm willing to try." Nathaniel reached for her free hand, hesitant, almost afraid she would pull away. When she didn't, he held on. "That's all I can ask for," he murmured. Over the next year, they took cautious steps toward rebuilding trust. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, difficult conversations, moments of doubt. But there were also victories, small, quiet ones, late-night feedings shared without tension, laughter, unguarded and unexpected. The sight of Nathaniel reading to Nicholas, his voice soft, his walls slowly breaking down. They co-parented with love, ensuring Nicholas had the warmth and security he deserved. And despite everything, Sienna saw something she hadn't expected. Nathaniel wasn't the same man he had been before. He was changing, for the better, for their son, and maybe, just maybe, for her too. Ariana remained a lingering presence in their lives, but she was kept at a distance, her interactions with Nathaniel restricted solely to discussions about Cassandra's well-being. She no longer held power over him. Sienna too had learned to set boundaries, no longer allowing Ariana's existence to infringe upon her emotional space. Meanwhile, therapy continued. There were still difficult nights, arguments that left the air thick with tension, moments where old wounds reopened, and nights when Sienna chose to sleep in a separate room, needing space to process her emotions. But there were also victories. Nicholas's first tooth, his first wobbly steps, his first birthday, celebrated with laughter and warmth, moments that reminded them of what they had built beyond the pain. Eventually, Sienna agreed to move back to Connecticut. On her terms. They sold the grand estate that once symbolized their fractured marriage, choosing instead a modest, family-friendly home. Together, they decorated Nicholas's room, filling it with bright colors and whimsical designs. Sienna made another decision, one that defined this new chapter of her life. She returned to work, part-time at her family's publishing house. She refused to be just someone's wife or someone's mother. She needed something of her own. Something no betrayal could take away. It wasn't perfect. The shadows of the past never fully vanished. But Nathaniel's remorse and unwavering dedication were real. Through quiet, consistent acts of love, Sienna realized she could let herself care for him again. Not recklessly, not blindly, but cautiously, with the lessons of heartbreak forever etched into her soul. Nathaniel, for his part, changed in ways even he hadn't expected. The relentless pursuit of power that once consumed him no longer defined his life. He spent more time at home, savoring the simple moments he had once taken for granted. He attended marriage retreats, read books on emotional intimacy, expressed gratitude for every second chance Sienna gave him. He was no longer the man who thought love was something he could take for granted. And for that, he was better. Their journey wasn't a fairy tale, nor was it a tragedy. It was something in between, a story of resilience, of two people who had been shattered, but chose to rebuild. Piece by fragile piece. Betrayal had broken them, but forgiveness, slow, imperfect, real, stitched them back together in a way that was different from before. Sienna proved that even the deepest heartbreak could be met with strength, that love didn't have to vanish in the face of betrayal. It could change. It could evolve into something more honest, more deliberate. Nathaniel learned that wealth and power meant nothing without respect and loyalty. And so he spent his days proving, not through words but through actions, that he was a man worthy of the second chance he had been given. Their journey had been steeped in pain. Yet, in the end, it was illuminated by hope, because sometimes the hardest fights lead to the greatest rewards, if we dare to believe in redemption. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect, if it touched something deep inside, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories that challenge, heal, and inspire. Until next time, stay strong, stay hopeful, and never stop believing in the power of second chances.